One thing that does have to be noted is some kinds of debts are not dischargeable. So, for example, if I have a judgment for child support or alimony, that's a non-dischargeable debt. So that debt does have to be scheduled in the bankruptcy petition, and it will not be discharged. If, on the other hand, the underlying debt is of the dischargeable variety, well, that judgment that the creditor has against you is not going to have any meaning whatsoever once you get your discharge. Because once you get your discharge, the liability is extinguished as part of that discharge. The difference between Chapter 7 and 13 is, in Chapter 7, if it's a dischargeable debt, you end up paying literally nothing to the creditor. In a Chapter 13, because you are proposing a multi-year debt repayment plan, that creditor is going to have to be paid something through the plan. Now, there is an additional layer of interest here, and that is, and when I say interest, I mean just that it's interesting, not that there is accruing interest. If the underlying debt is what's known as a priority debt, and the judgment is on a priority debt, then that debt is going to have to be paid in full through the Chapter 13 plan, unless the creditor accepts alternate treatment. So the difference really is centered on the fact that in Chapter 13, creditors do get paid something, whereas in Chapter 7, they get paid nothing. Finally, there's this idea of priority debt may seem a little mysterious to you. So in bankruptcy, in the taxonomy of debt, we break things down. One way to break things down is to distinguish between what are called secured debts and unsecured debts. The secured debt is a debt that's secured by some tangible asset. If you don't make the payments, the creditor can take the asset back. Typical examples are things like a home mortgage or a car loan. If you don't make mortgage payments, the creditor eventually will foreclose on the house. If you don't make the car payments, well, eventually the creditor will repossess the car. So the house, the car, they serve as collateral or security for the debt. That's why it's called a secured debt. Unsecured debts are debts where there is no asset that can be repossessed in the event of a default. Typical examples are things like credit card debt, medical debt. I mean, what are they going to come and repossess your heart because you owe money on a medical debt? Well, they might take a kidney, but they're not going to take your heart. Anyway, I don't mean that they're really going to take the kidney. Bad joke. If you have kidney disease, I apologize. In any event, unsecured debts are debts where there isn't something that can be repossessed in the event of a default. Within the realm of unsecured debts, Congress, in its finite wisdom, has seen fit to give special priority to some kinds of unsecured debts. They're given better treatment in bankruptcy than general unsecured debts that are not entitled to priority. A couple of examples will illustrate what I'm talking about. Obligations to pay child support or alimony are priority debts because Congress wanted to make sure that children weren't just being abandoned by, let's say, the deadbeat dad. So if you owe back child support or alimony, that is not a debt that you can discharge in bankruptcy, and it is priority, meaning if there are any payments to be made in a bankruptcy case, either as a result of liquidating assets in a Chapter 7 or through a Chapter 11 or Chapter 13 repayment plan, that debt is going to have to be paid in full. Another type of priority debt that probably won't surprise you is most tax debt. There is some tax debt that is dischargeable, but generally speaking, most tax debt is not only non-dischargeable, but it's priority tax debt, and it does have to be paid in full. So if the judgment, the underlying judgment, is surrounding a priority debt, then that debt is going to be not discharged at the completion of the case.